1.
Good afternoon. Today's Monday, April 22nd, 2024. It's Earth Day. Happy Earth Day. And this is the Education and Culture Committee, joined by my colleague, Councilmember Albornoz and Councilmember Mink, virtually, and Chair Will Jawando. This is our second work session on the FY25 Operating Budget request for Montgomery County Public Schools, second of 4. In our first session, just to remind you, we looked over the overview of the budget, went over the financial reports and the fund balance, and we also discussed several issues related to special education, the Darnestown Learning Center specifically, touched on the Title I status and funding at various schools, and overall communication within the community. This session will focus on some of the key programmatic funding items in the budget, including accelerators, ESSER replacement funding, which is the federal dollars that is ending next year, technology modernization, enrollment, and dual enrollment program. And they're kind of, in each section, the way we're going to do it is, as we go through, it kind of has the packets laid out. If you're here for those various sections, we're going to play a little musical chairs. We'll have those folks come up, and I imagine some people will be up here for the whole time, like Mr. Hall. Lucky you, and then others will probably rotate out. And then we'll just, my understanding is there's no MCPS presentations, so to speak. So we will, have staff do the overview, Ms. McGuire, and then we'll get into a dialogue and have questions. If there's anything you want to say at the front end about a section you think is in particular important, please just let us know, and we'll obviously allow for that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. McGuire. And invite our guests up. I think, Mr. Hull, you're going to... So the first item is accelerators, right?
That's correct. So the first section of the packet, and thank you for that overview, the first section of the packet does go through the priority enhancements for FY25. And these are in a couple of categories. First are sort of the more traditional accelerators or initiatives, increases to the operating budget that are brand new and have not been in the budget before. In some cases, they do have a corresponding amount already in the base budget that the request is increasing. And the table that's on page 2 of your budget, of your packet, the table that's on page 2 of your packet shows both the requested amount of funding that's new for FY25, FTE if applicable, and then it does also show the base funding that is already existing in the funding that would connect to that. The second table on page 3 of your packet reflects the items that have been funded with ESSER funding and are now being requested to shift to the general fund and the operating budget. MCPS provided a more comprehensive chart of these items on Circle 1, the first page attachment of your packet, that really details more of a crosswalk through of, again, the items that were funded in ESSER, the extent to which they have other base funding in the operating budget that connects to that, and then in some cases those items were funded only through ESSER in the past, and in other cases those items had been funded in the budget, were placed onto ESSER last year to help meet affordability goals, and now are being requested to go back. And so I've just sort of itemized briefly here on page 3 that of the funding increases related to ESSER, 15 of those items do represent the whole budget for that function, at least as defined in this case. Again, they may connect to other things, but there is the budget for that item. 8 of the items were shifted to ESSER last year from the base budget to meet affordability levels, and now are being requested to move back. And then 6 of the items have other related base funding that, again, this would be in addition to. So just to sort of give a picture of those, again, all of these priority enhancements that you have here are increases to the budget, but again, they do sort of stem from a different origin point. So this section, I think we could just stop there and see if committee members have any questions about any of those particular items before we move into some of the specific areas.
Figure that out. Thank you, Mr. Squire. So any Mr. Hull, since we're starting off here, anything you want to say about these priority enhancements or the accelerators just at the top before we get into specific questions?
Sure. Thank you for that opportunity. So Brian Hull, Chief Operating Officer. We really, in building the budget this year and in communication with council staff and county executive staff, knew that it was going to be a very challenging financial year for the county. Just not enough money to do everything we want to do. Of course, we've seen this ESSER cliff coming from the school side for 4 years now. It's hard to imagine that, but it was about 4 years ago that COVID started, and the federal government was quick to respond with the first wave of funding, the CARES Act. And so we've been planning for this and anticipating it coming, but we always knew it was going to be tough. We have $120 million of federal revenue budgeted this year. That's just not going to be there next year. And there's no way to make that easy. It's $120 million. It's a good chunk of our budget. But we really limited the number of new programs and accelerators that we were asking for. I believe we came to this committee last year with something like $46 million in accelerators. This year, beyond what's required through blueprint funding and the shifts from ESSER, it's a much more modest, about $4 million in new enhancements. Then we do have about $8 million for pre-K and then a little over $30 million from the ESSER. And even on the ESSER, as I said, we whittled it down from $120 million down to $30, really prioritizing the investments that we feel are vital to continuing to support our kids through the recovery from COVID-19. And just to be clear, I think everyone understands that we very much are still in the recovery phase. Many of our young people, at least, are still recovering from COVID, as well as our schools. And so making sure that we identified priorities around psychologists, social workers, some of our parent and community coordinators and other folks that work directly with our schools and with our students to provide those wraparound services. So that's really what you're seeing in the ESSER accelerators, along with a few other things. There's a line item for curriculum here, just some things that were moved over at the end of the last budget year. We needed to identify things that aligned with the federal funding requirements, and so that's why you see some things that may seem a little bit more random, like curriculum materials, and then contractual services. But really the budget is lean and focused around these key priority needs.
Appreciate that. That's helpful by way of introduction. I'll start off, and then I know other council members will want to ask questions. And then if you have anything you want to speak on, just let us know. A lot of these will be questions from me. One question is kind of for both of you. The packet lists 13 accelerators totaling $4.83 million and 13 FTEs. But there was also a March 1st letter from you all that came to us and to the county executive that totaled 11 FTEs and $4.624 million. Do you know what I'm referring to? It was a March 1st letter from the board. So something could have changed.
Is that the budget transmittal letter?
Yes.
Oh, I think I know.
Okay. Yeah, I figured you'd know. Yeah.
I think I know. The difference actually is that the board, in its action, made a number of changes, but two of the changes that it made in particular are captured on this list as accelerators because they are new to the budget. So they didn't necessarily meet the original intent or the original definition of accelerators that was produced in the transmittal letter. But they are included here. They are the last two items on this chart, and again, those were specifically added by the board, and so we represented them just as new.
Got it. Makes total sense. I knew there was an answer for that. Okay. So I'm going to turn to colleagues in a moment, but let me ask the computerized maintenance system here, which for 250 is listed as an accelerator. That's an ongoing expense? So could you talk about that and what that is?
Yes, that is an ongoing expense, and it is where our schools put in help ticket requests for maintenance and I guess mainly maintenance work. And so that is how we track, prioritize, and capture those requests as they come in from the schools. Okay,
and that's something that you started using, you need, and it's going to be an ongoing expense that you have to
Correct.
And what it wasn't happening before? Or?
So I believe, and we can follow up, but I believe this current year was the first year, and so the annual charge was included in the implementation for this year, and then this will be the ongoing cost in subsequent years.
Got it.
But I'll follow up to make sure.
Okay. And the CPS language line, how is that? Could you talk about just how that's used and what the funding needs are for that, you think, going forward?
Yep. So that is a service that we provide to all and any MCPS families that need translation services. So it could be, used in a conversation with the teacher. It could be used in an IEP meeting. Anything where translation services are needed, where we're not able to have, for whatever reason, an actual translator in the meeting. And so the usage of this has been going up as our student population continues to expand and diversify. But we've also just we've been using more of it than we've had budgeted the past several years. And so this is kind of, as I think I've heard you say, truth in budgeting. Let's put in here what we really anticipate that we're going to spend.
Got it. We like truth in budgeting. Appreciate that. All right, and then I'm going to ask one more, and then I'll turn to Councilmember Mink, who's texted me, and then if Councilmember Albornoz, then we'll just keep going around here. We've heard a lot from students and during the budget process, and from principals and teachers and parents about the positive impacts of the restorative justice programs. And as I've mentioned this before, and I think it's always something that I think about when I toured Julius West Middle School, our largest middle school. The principal said the number one thing, if he could have it, and he's not one of the schools that has a full-time RJ coach, but he said if there was one thing on his wish list, that's what he would want, to be able to move his part-time, the guy who's teaching and doing this on a stipend, to full-time, because they've seen such an impact in their school. We know from your own data that when if you go through one of these programs or one of these restorative justice practitioner or circles, you're 80% of the time you're not doing the activity again, so it's working. You have invested some money into it, but it as I do the math, and it's always scary when you're a lawyer doing the math, but it looks like it's less than what is currently offered.
And just to jump ahead, there is the next section does provide a little bit of a summary of that. It is less. The number of positions, MCPS has clarified that the number of dedicated coaches is the same at 8, but the overall dollars for the stipends are less in 25. And so that, I just wanted to note that that is laid out for you on the bottom of page 3 and top of page 4 of your packet. There is also more detail on the school allocations, and basically the MCPS response did say that as the funding goes forward, they'll have to evaluate how to allocate the stipends.
Got it. And what did thank you, Ms. McGuire, and what did the amount of the stipend go down to?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Monteleone to come up and provide a little bit more context as far as the dollar amount, but then also how we're going to continue to provide the service.
Yeah, and then just the larger question of why, and in the context of what I just said, the request from Julius West principal was that his stipend RJ coach would be able to go full time. Instead, under this budget, his stipend coach will get less money to do the same amount of work, as I read it. And let's talk about why.
So I'll start off with just a point of clarification. And I know maybe we have to have different terms or names. The RJ coaches are in all of our schools. So they're in 211 schools. The coaches are the ones that receive the stipend. Okay? The coaches are...
You just said the same thing twice, it sounded like me. You said the RJ coaches are in all 211 schools?
Yep, and receive the stipend. But I wanted to clarify between the specialists and the coaches.
Yeah, there's only 8 of the specialists.
8 specialists. I think we may have said 8 coaches before. So with respect to the coaches themselves, right?
Or full-time teachers.
They are full-time teachers, they are full-time counselors, they are full-time educators, right? And so they receive a stipend the same way a football coach, chess club, whatever other extracurricular coach would receive a stipend to do this work on top of their additional work, either during a planning period, after school, or what have you, right? So the coaches, we had funded, and Ms. Lopez Arias, if I'm mistaken here, help me here, but we had funded the high school coaches on the base budget right? Excuse me, the secondary coaches on the base budget. We added elementary coaches to the elementary schools during the pandemic with ESSER funding, okay? So that was the expansion. The reason that this budget does not reflect the exact same amount of money, right, towards this as we had put forward last year was because of our need to reduce the ESSER from whatever it was, 120 to 30 million. So we were under the direction to look at ESSER funds as something that we would need to reduce first and foremost. Knowing that this is something that we really absolutely want to continue, we have and we are in the midst of, if we aren't able to receive the funds, to look at possible grant opportunities to pay for this stipend, okay? The stipend amount was $3,000, right, this past year, $3,000 times 140 for our elementary schools. For our secondary schools, it was 400 times 70. I think in my head that's going to come out to about 800, maybe
$400?
$4,000 for the secondary schools, $3,000 for the elementary schools. So 3,000 times 140, 4,000 times 70, and I believe it's about 800 and something $1,000 if I recall. So where we are right now, I believe the funding, if without looking at the line item, was $315,000 is what is currently allocated in the budget towards the RJ coach stipends. At this rate, clearly we pay people peanuts on the dollar across the board, and we may lose coaches if we try to spread that out through all of our schools. If we focus that dollar amount into perhaps secondary schools, we may be able to fund those stipends at a rate that would keep the staff who have been doing it or attract others. So this is where we are right now. We are happy, right, that we have no cuts to any of our restorative justice specialists at the district level, and we did work with the budget office in that regard. So if I'm mistaken on my on the why behind that, please correct me, Mr. Hull.
And just to clarify, I believe that the remaining amount for stipends is $414,716 for stipends in the budget. In the budget request.
So it's 100,000 more than I quoted. Okay, I didn't.
So, but about half cut by half. And so the board has not determined, or the system hasn't recommended, and the board hasn't determined what you're going to do to cut those and what the allocation will be. Is that correct? That's okay.
The secondary stipend is was 6,000. Pardon me, which is close to like a varsity football coach. It's a very good stipend. Sorry, your question
is and obviously it's a lot of work too, right? So you don't have a plan today if the money's approved at the number that you requested, which is half of what you were doing last year, of how you're going to allocate that. It sounds like you do have a plan.
Well, our current thinking is that we would need to target that funding to most likely the secondary level.
So removing the elementary.
Yes, and here's why. Because our elementary schools have the most external supports and partnerships, right, and additional staff. So we have our linkages to learning staff, we have our community schools, we have Title I, we have a lot of additional resources and mental health supports and mentors and whatnot in those schools. And really, where our desert, if you will, is really at the middle school level, because we're thankful to have the Bridge to Wellness and Wellness Centers in our high schools. So that is really the area where the data shows that we would need to ensure that we kept those coaches and also in the high schools as well.
And with that, I haven't done the math, but in your estimation, would that be enough to not reduce even the secondary school number?
No, we would have to reduce the secondary as well.
So you see the dilemma here is that, like they're already saying at the amount that it's working. Like this one's real tough for me, and I'm spending a lot of time on it because it's working. I've seen it work. The principal, longtime principal of the largest high school says, like, if you could give me anything, please let my stipended part-time coach be full-time. And now instead the budget proposal is the reduction of that person's stipend. So that's really hard. And again, I know the board will have to make tough decisions based on the top line, but I just want to say I think that is something that we shouldn't be doing, and we should be trying to go in another direction. I know it's tough decisions. Anytime trying to get the 130 million to, or 120 million to 30, that's a lot to cover. So I get that. I know, yes,
I'm sorry,
please.
just again, real quick math, if at $6,000 a stipend per secondary school, if there are 70 secondary schools, although there might be slightly more than that, that would come to 420, which is slightly above the 415 for sure. But again, it feels like it might be close.
Yeah, right. I know Councilmember Mink has a question on this item, so I'll go to her, and then if Councilmember Allen has a question. Councilmember Mink.
I mean, I'll second that conversation. First of all, restorative justice is one of the programs that I've consistently heard.
Councilmember Mink, just one second. I want to try to turn you down a little bit. I don't know if we can do that.
Never.
There you go. I think you're good. Keep talking.
All right. Okay.
You're good. You're good.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, restorative justice is also one of the programs that I have consistently heard positive feedback about out in the community from both staff and students and parents. So seeing the cuts is very concerning. It's also one that we have seen positive results about when we're in committee looking at those presentations. And we know that this is a piece that touches so many of the priority areas that we talk about here, from academics to, looking at the culture of classrooms and schools, to, preventing kids from having disciplinary issues. That this is a program that, we've just seen a lot of really positive metrics around. And so I just want to acknowledge that how difficult I know looking for those cuts has been for MCPS. And, if we're going to ask you to restore funding in some places, I would think that the obvious question would be like, well, where do you want us to cut it from? And I don't have a good answer for that. So I will just say this is a difficult conversation. This, I think, I would like to see as one of the priorities. But I do think that, while this lies with the board and with MCPS, that we also take responsibility for that side of the conversation here. And so that's why I really appreciate going and looking through these line items in such detail, because this one is really difficult. So would love to circle back on this conversation. And I also wanted to shift to another of the line items and just point out the 4 additional positions for the Department of Compliance and Investigation. As we all are painfully aware, there have been some historic failings in this area that MCPS is working to remedy. And so I just wanted to note and appreciate those 4 additional positions and give you an opportunity to explain how those new positions would relate to MCPS's work to fix the complaint investigations process.
So thank you, Councilmember Mink, for that question. I think that I absolutely understand the concern around restorative justice. I think that this is a program and it's something new and it's working and it's addressing a real need for our students right now. I do think that this is going to be indicative of a lot of the conversations we have as we work through this process, because there's been so many cuts over the past couple of years, including in this budget proposal, that there's nothing left to cut that's not going to hurt. And so as we start looking at, closing the budget gap and what we're going to need to do, there's going to be a lot of really difficult conversations and I think concern from council members, board members, and certainly staff around, these are not things that we should be cutting. But, as we find ourselves in this situation. But specifically to address your question, council member, I'm sorry, now I got off on a tangent.
DCI.
DCI, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we have, oh yes, Ms. Key is here, so she can come down and explain exactly how that money is going to be used. Fabulous.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. We are very grateful for the additional funds for DCI. We have hired additional investigators to bring the caseload down, as it is extremely high, and we are hiring a director who is steeped in the law and trained in investigations, and she will be providing the content oversight of the department, and then we'll still have our director too that knows the MCPS side.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I'm sorry. Did you want to introduce yourself for the record real quick?
I'm sorry, April Key for the record.
Great, thank you. Also, the line item for contractual services, including college tracks and others, how much of that, do you know how much of that line item is going to college tracks?
I believe it's about 900,000. Yep, thumbs up, 900,000.
900,000. Great. Just wanted to give them a shout out. We know that they do great work. They are doing that very important work that so many of us talk about the need to connect our MCPS students, making sure that every MCPS student is able to be connected to, where they're going to go after school to higher education. And, last time we spoke with them, they were telling us about how they're, also bridging that connection from higher education into the workforce and carrying students straight through, and their metrics are fantastic. So that's a great investment, and glad to see those efforts expand. As a general question, let's see, is it easy or difficult to be able to look at these charts and tell us which of those are blueprint required? And maybe that's a question for Ms. McGuire, or maybe it's a question for MCPS.
So we're looking at each other. So I will just say that I am working on compiling some of the specific blueprint outlined requests for our next meeting, and most of those do relate to pre-K, at least in terms of the additions that are being added this for FY25. Certainly there are base elements related to dual enrollment, which we'll get to in this packet in a little bit, AB and IB, other AP and IB rather, and other base elements. I'll defer to the school system if any of these specifically are blueprint required. Certainly they may connect to.
Are we looking on
Pillars.
page 3 or?
I think 2 and 3.
2 and 3.
Accelerators and ESSER.
Nothing that's jumping out as,
Same.
no, nothing on here would be directly to the blueprint. And to your point, I think the majority of it, I want to say maybe 6 out of the 8 million is for pre-K. Yvonne, do you want?
Yes, and again, we'll have that,
Yeah.
we will compile that for the next meeting, but by far and away, the bulk of the FY25 request specifically to increases for blueprint relates to pre-K.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And, if we can get in one place, and I know it's coming together piece by piece over these committee meetings, but this is in response to our conversation about how tight this budget is and how we would like to see funding restored for some of these pieces. We're working within a very tight MCPS budget. We're also working more broadly within a very, very tight county budget, and we're making decisions, about how to handle that. That it would be helpful, I think, for the general public as well as the council to, as much as it's possible, really see a complete line item breakdown of the operating budget, so that as these questions come up, if there are conversations like, well, I'm sure that you can just find it somewhere, the more that we're able to answer that with confidence, and that you're able to answer that with confidence, and the public can see that happening, that's going to be really helpful in making some of those difficult decisions. If funding needs to be restored to MCPS, and how we're balancing that against other demands across different county departments, I think that that there needs to be as transparently as possible a really clear accounting of how all of those dollars are currently being spent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mink.
Then I yield.
It's a good point. Just one quick question. And, I've kind of had an epiphany of sorts over the last 6 years on this committee, in that while it's the school board's authority to allocate the budget that we provide, it's hard to provide a budget without the appropriate level of detail and context. And I think we've worked our way towards more detail and context. Not I think we have. And the system's been very helpful with that. But I really want to underscore that point. I had asked a question earlier incompletely, and my staff helped me, and so I just want to get back to it. The CPS language line that we talked about, and you explained what it does. But my question will be, do you have current data on the usage of the language line? And so you're requesting additional funding for it. So any background on who's using it? Has that gone up or down? for why you would include the funding in here.
So we certainly do have that data. I don't have it off the top of my head, and I'm not seeing any head nods behind me, so we can follow up with that. But yeah,
That'd be something. I just think for any of these if there's, it'd be helpful to have that context of okay, well, why? Like, for example, we got into the RJ, we know why, because we've gone through that in detail and why it's helping and why you would request, even though it's a reduction, but why you would include some of it in here. So I would love, Ms. McGuire, just to follow up on that. If you guys could get back to what the usage is, how that's gone up or down over time, and why, and how that connects to why you're asking for it as an accelerator.
Yep, and that, of course, is one of those services that we provide that regardless if we have enough money in the budget or not, we're not going to cut off the service to our
course.
families. And so
Yeah,
it's
of course.
making sure that we've got enough to represent the actual usage.
Absolutely. Councilmember Albornoz.
Happy Earth Day. And speaking of Earth Day, I need to give MCPS a big shout out. I attended the event at Loiterman Middle School this morning, the new urban farm that has been developed in partnership with Habitat for Humanity, one of our local farms, and I was blown away. There were hundreds of students who were there to volunteer their time. Their parents came in many instances, and the level of enthusiasm and the partnership and coming together to address in a very unique way a global problem was really extraordinary. And so I just want to thank you all so much and hope that we can replicate that in other schools and in other districts moving forward. But it was a great morning. So jumping in, and let me just say how much I appreciate and respect your efforts to reduce the ESSER funds as much as you have. That was a big reduction, and we obviously all recognize and know and respect you had to make some very difficult decisions, and you followed your own internal process to get us here, and I respect that process as well as the board's oversight. I'll start with the restorative justice. So I concur with a lot of what my colleagues have said. I really enjoyed the session that we had several months ago. Mr. Monteleone, you and your team did an outstanding job of giving us an update of where the program was. We did receive very positive feedback from the principals that testified. We do have to acknowledge this program is ongoing. It's still being developed. And while the early returns have been positive, it'll be a while before we know the full outcome or impact or effect of the program as a whole. And I also, understand and respect the manner in which you all had to go through a difficult series of decisions to reduce the program to fit the budget. And I concur with the approach you've taken. I do think that we need to be focusing on the secondary schools with the middle schools and high schools in particular, where we are obviously having the largest incidences of challenges, the least infrastructure of support, the more complicated cases. And I think that keeping the program going, sustaining it, and if we can, investing more in it, but in those areas where we have the highest areas of need makes sense to me. I said at the outset of our discussions, there were several buckets that were of particular importance to me, and I know all of you and our constituents and all of my colleagues on the council. One of them is safety and security, and overall health and emotional wellness of students. And that program in particular uniquely addresses both of those issues in a way that's comprehensive and holistic and unique. And so I do think to the degree to which we can support not just maintaining but further investing with the program with fidelity. So that we really give it the best chance to succeed. That is a healthy stipend, but at the end of the day, it's just a stipend. And we've heard repeatedly from teachers in the classrooms about how overwhelmed the current situation is right now. So, but I do think it makes sense for us to concentrate on those secondary school levels, particularly because of the other supports that we have at the elementary school level. So I also believe that in this list of 13 FTEs, and there are some absolute non-negotiables here, and Councilmember Mink articulated several of them, but I'll underscore that the Office of School Support and Wellbeing Directors, the staff for Department of Compliance and Investigation, I mean, each of these touch those categories that, I just mentioned and will continue to mention as we have more of these sessions. And I did also have questions about the language line and seeing exactly what the breakdown looks like there. So I don't have very much to add beyond expressing my appreciation and not disagreeing with the recommendations that have been made for this category in particular, but I do think there are several of these line items that, again, to me, are non-negotiables.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. All right, so Ms. McGuire, I think we can continue on to the.
So at the top of page 5 of your packet, the next item that the committee had expressed interest in hearing more detail about is the safety and security budget, and the board's budget document does identify 7 FTE and 1.2 million related to security enhancements and educational supports. And MCPS did provide the detail that you see here in your packet regarding the items for that increase.
Great. And so safety and security was after ESSER, correct?
It is, so the packet presents a number of these program updates in the context of
ESSER, yes.
of the accelerators and the ESSER additions and replacements, just highlighting a couple of those that are added here. And so just the safety and security is there, and then I did also present some information on the FY24 focus that was added regarding math and literacy supports. There hasn't been a change to those in FY25, but there, again, just certainly has been a lot of focus, and in recent presentations, the committee has heard of the some of the improvements and good news in some of that data, which is also here in your packet, and just wanted to highlight that those efforts are continuing in the base for 25. Again, just to kind of put some context around some of the additions that are being requested.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I did have a question related to this outline. Board member Sami Saeed, the student board member, had a resolution that the board passed on safety and security in schools, and he's been talking about it a lot, and I've talked to him several times about it. It had 5 key modifications to the school system safety and security plan, along with enhancements for communication around safety-related events. Does this 1.2 million in security enhancements for the FY25 budget, does that incorporate the components, and will that support components of that resolution? If so, how?
It begins to. I think when we presented to the board a couple of weeks ago, we had our short-term priorities, which were things that we thought we could accomplish in the next 6 months or so. Aiming for the start of school, not necessarily as a hard marker, but as a target, and certainly getting them in place near the beginning of next school year. Some of them, like the student IDs, there'll be a little bit of a lag because they don't get their IDs until the school pictures are taken, and then the IDs are printed, in late September, early October. But at any rate, aiming for that. And then there's more long-term solutions that we really need to be looking at, and that includes things like potentially the weapons detection devices. And we're actually going down to Alexandria Public Schools tomorrow morning at about 7 a.m. to be there when their high schools start, and the students are entering the building. They've got some of these devices there to really see how they work and how many students they're able to get through. With schools of 2,500 or 3,000 kids, that is a primary concern, is how many of these units would we need, and then each one of them, of course, needs to be staffed with 3 or 4 individuals. And so just making sure that it is practical, but as the technology continues to improve, I think it's becoming more and more realistic for Montgomery County Public Schools. Of course, there is a significant budget component to that we estimate around $10 million that is not included in this for the reasons that we have talked about earlier, but something we certainly want to work with the council on moving forward to figure out how we can launch that type of a program in Montgomery County. So some of the things are addressed here, others will require additional time and additional investments.
Because we did a pilot.
We have not done a pilot, so that's something that we're definitely
We're considering.
We're going to do a pilot and see how that goes, and then roll it out from there. We did do a pilot with the vape detectors.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yep. And so those will all be installed hopefully by the end of this school year, certainly by the beginning of the next school year in all of our secondary, or all of our high schools. And then the cost that's included in here is just the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of those devices.
Right, so you did the pilot with the vape detectors, it worked, at least it had positive outcomes, and now you're going to be putting all those in the high schools next year.
Correct.
And that's part of the money in here for that.
Yep.
Are there additional funds related to the Juul settlement that can be used to enhance? I know there was, the packet points out that there's, I think it's just under 1.2 is being allocated. Is that the total amount here, or is there other funds related to that?
So that's the total amount budgeted for FY25. We also invested, actually purchasing the vape detectors in this current fiscal year, and so that would be an addition.
Money for that.
Yes, in this current fiscal year. And then the settlement is ongoing for, I believe, 6 years. And so we'll be getting an installment of, around that amount for each of the next 5 or 6 years.
And obviously, we'll use it towards these types of efforts.
Yep.
Good point. I meant to do this at the top, but I want to say congratulate the newly elected SMOB, Praneel Suvarna, who was elected since we had the last meeting. So we look forward to working with him. He's a junior at Clarksburg and the current president of the MCSGA. Okay, I think that was a question. You mentioned how you're going to use the additional money, so thank you for that.
And I'm sorry, if I may, Ms. Alfonso Windsor, our budget director, just texted me 3 years. Each of the next 3 years we'll be receiving.
We like the right information. Okay, so you'll get about a similar amount for the next 3 years. Got it. Councilmember Albornoz? Anything on this?
Thank you. Yeah, it includes prevention efforts. I'd just be curious if you could elaborate on those and what the partnership is with HHS and other outside agencies.
Yep. So that part of it is really being run through our chief medical officer, and so we've allocated $100,000 for educational efforts, which in their estimation would be plenty. Obviously, that's a lot of money for that, and so that's going to kind of be the main effort around getting to the root cause of trying to prevent kids from getting addicted to nicotine or whatever they're vaping. Then of course there is the additional security guards, which will provide additional coverage for the bathrooms where a lot of this is taking place, and then the vape detectors. And so certainly trying to capture it from a if kids are doing it, we need to deal with that, but then also the educational side to hopefully prevent kids from even starting with the vaping.
That'd be great. It'd be great, Ms. McGuire, if we could dovetail and look into what HHS is doing with treatment, just so we can have a well-rounded picture of what we're doing holistically as a community to address the vaping issue.
Thank you. I do want to mention, since you talked about the security guards, so this part of the budget will fund, I believe it says here, 7 new security assistants.
Correct.
So 4 across our 5 high schools. I'm assuming you have some sort of plan of how you're going to distribute them, and then 3 at middle schools, and then 2 and then a temporary part-time security costs. What does that mean? Does that mean like extra on-site security that's contracted, or what does that mean?
No. It would be our employees, but it's kind of like having a sub pool. So if a school is down 1, 2, or 3 security assistants on any given day, this would allow us to, send some other folks over there to address those needs. Because when they're down, then they've got to redo, their entire plan for the day. And so having some people that we can plug in is really helpful for our high schools and middle schools.
I would love to see I know you're not going to have it today, but like how you're going to allocate these across the new folks across the schools. We just had our budget forum at Blair. Thank you for those who attended. Many of you attended, and it was, I spoke to the security staff after. Blair is obviously our most populated high school in the county, in the state, has the most students. And they have the full complement of security guards. I guess it's 6. They don't have enough. And when someone goes down because they either are injured, breaking up a fight, or get sick or whatever it is, they just don't have enough. And they asked me to say also, which I told them I promised I would, they're paid as 9-month employees, and they they have to hustle like some of our other 9-month employees to try to get summer school and other things to make. And the starting salary for one of our security assistants is $21,000, which is below poverty. And so the context of this, it is such an important, if you talk to any resident, MCPS parent, safety and security is like top of the list. You know, we just had a big incident, that we were able to prevent at Wooten High School, thanks to good coordination. And like, we are paying like poverty wages to people that don't have enough people, that are like the front line of making sure that our schools are safe and secure. So I just want people to understand, and I know you had to make tough decisions, so this is not blaming, but the context in which a school of 3,000 nearly has 6 people, one is down, injured, and so that's why it's really good you're going to do the pool, but we have to find a way to professionalize pay and increase. I mean, it has to be on a track to being better. I mean, they were in desperation talking to me the other night, and I didn't have good answers. And I think we just have to do better for something. It's just like one of those things that's a super priority for the community. And here are the folks that are on the front lines of it. So just wanted to give voice to that, and also underscores the very tough decisions. When you say there's not much room in this budget, I mean, like, you're asking for 7 more people across, what is it, 25 plus 40, or plus the 70 secondary schools, or whatever that is, so it's not going to spread, it's not going to help those numbers very much. So just wanted to underscore that.
And if I may, I'm
Please.
getting some updates here.
Yeah.
So they would be 10-month employees, not 9, but point is, it's
Sorry,
not a
yes.
year-round job. And the starting salary should be about $36,000, which still is, if it's not poverty, it's not, much above that if you've got a family that you're trying to provide for. And I think
the guy who started, when he started, it was 21, and he moved up over time. That would make sense. So inflationary adjustment, but still not.
it's not enough. It's not enough, and we don't have enough of them. I mean, I would love to add significantly more than that, but again, obviously, we're dealing with limited resources and competing priorities. But I agree, it's got to be a top priority for the system.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Mink, did you have anything? No, you didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
I'll second that, and I'll just say that so far we're all pointing out line items where we would like to see more funding, and none where we really want to see it taken away. So just noting that for the record. And when we have folks who come to us and ask about security in schools, even residents who have asked about having police in schools, which continues to be an ongoing conversation. When I talk to them, generally they say, well, it's not like I want them in there arresting kids. It's not like I think that they need to be in there with a gun. So at that point, we were talking about is security personnel, and especially given that we have a staffing shortage in the police department, as we do, everywhere. This is a really important piece to make sure that we get right. So as we come back to kind of the broader budget conversation, and if there needs to be more money in going to the school system versus other places in the county, which is a difficult conversation because we're tight everywhere. Again, this is another one that, taking a look at the price tag for what it would look like to be able to do really quality recruitment and retention and add more positions here. This is a line item I think that we're going to continue to want to look at.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Albornoz?
Yeah, we've had sessions with our public safety committee, joint committee sessions before. I think we need to have one this summer in light of everything that's happening. And when we prepare for that, just as we do a comparative analysis of salaries with other jurisdictions, we should do that here as well, just to see how it relates. And there's going to be a lot of policy support for enhancing and ensuring you all have what you need. And I think, but we need to make sure that the investment is the right investment, and be assured that that's actually what it will be invested in. But it's very clear with what we are seeing, what we are feeling. I mean, we are hearing of too many incidences and cases that are cause for very significant concern, that rise to the level of assault that are happening too frequently. So I didn't focus as much as I should have on those starting salaries, and it is absolutely something that we're going to have to address. So that's just a suggestion that we meet as soon as possible.
Agreed, yeah. So we'll do a session on that going into the summer. I think it's a good time with public safety. We'll talk to Chair Katz. And another thing that I told the security guards, I'd mentioned that one of the young ladies said to me, she was like, we're not just security, we're like the counselors, we're the social, like they are like at the front level of someone's in conflict. Because like if you get into, they are dealing with that, much like many of the trusted adults in the building are, but they're dealing with it when something goes wrong or when someone's not where they're supposed to be and all those things. So it's, we really need to, I think, hone in on that. I know you don't disagree. It's just a matter of how do we find the support for it.
And we really want our security personnel to get to know our students and help them work through things and, again, try to get to the root cause of some of these issues. But, yes, it does make it a complex and challenging job as you're, dealing with young people who are sometimes in crisis.
Yeah, appreciate that. Anything else on this? We'll move to the next one now. Thank you.
Should we go to international enrollment?
So where are we at? Math and
Well,
literacy?
I had quickly summarized before the math and literacy. I didn't know if there were questions about that because, again, I really just wanted to point out that the resources from last year are carrying through in the 25 budget.
Oh, Kristin, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I actually wanted to go back to a question from the previous section about one of the accelerators. Apologies. My staff is pointing out on the college tracks question that I think their contract previously was for $975, and Mr. Hull, I think that you said about 900. So maybe about 900 means 975, but I just wanted to get clarity there that if it's less than it was last year, I want to make sure that that's certainly a line item that we understand, that we fully understand, how those cuts would impact on the ground.
It is not exactly 975. I believe it's, I want to say 915. Is that? How much from title funding?
It was 487 for this year. 487
For next year?
for next year.
487. So 487,000 from Title I funding and 650 from the operating budget.
So, I'm sorry, just to say again.
I think we might need to follow up with those exact numbers. I'm seeing some disagreement.
Okay.
But it is around 400,000. My take was it was a little bit less than it is this current year, but very close. But we'll follow up with the exact numbers.
Okay, yeah, if you could get that over to me right away, and then hopefully you've talked to college tracks about what that would mean on the ground, but if we could make sure that we have clarity on that as quickly as possible, that would be very helpful. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
I yield.
Thank you, Councilmember Mink. And so, Ms. McGuire, you're saying math and literacy, you're just noting that the FTEs here for the math coaches and the supervisors, that's part of this mix.
Yes.
You can say it better than I.
I just wanted to highlight this in the budget because it is such a critical area
Sure,
of attention and discussion. Certainly, it was one of the major areas of investment last year in the FY24 current budget. While there are not identified specific accelerators or increases associated with this, I did want to highlight that does still remain as an area of focus, of course. It's continually an area of focus in terms of our data review. And I know at one point, certainly the system had indicated that, the need to spend some more time with this strategy to really understand sort of what a future build out would look like, but that the early results are positive, as we've seen, not to put words in people's mouths.
Yep. And we had a brief discussion about how the reading and math work is working at the elementary level last time. And obviously these continue as part of the base budget, even though they're not accelerators. So, yeah, we can move on to, I think, to international enrollment, right?
International enrollment starts on page 6 of your packet, and this is an area that, again, the committee wanted to get an update on, certainly as well, in both in terms of the numbers of students coming in as well as just the budget aspects of this. So you have some unfortunately tiny charts in your packet. On page 6 shows the number of student intakes by month over the last year, January to January. Again, these are not net numbers or a total. It just shows the workload and intake of the office each month, and you can see certainly very high numbers over the summer and the early fall leading up to the start of school, but clearly there's at least a steady stream, if not more, going on throughout the year. The budget for the Office of International Admissions and Enrollment in FY25 is $3.9 million. The staffing complement is shown on page 7 of your packet. And MCPS provided some information here regarding the really collaborative approach to international enrollment that's taken with MCPS and DHHS and other partners to ensure that families have the supports that they need, as they come in. Council staff would just note one other connection in the committee's discussions around the CIP. There has been a note of transforming the Carver Educational Services Center on Hungerford Drive into a welcome center, and certainly that would provide a space that is more accessible than some of the current spaces, centrally to the county, and also just sort of in the space, but certainly also would allow potentially for more space and really facilitate some of those collaborative approaches.
Thank you. Any comments you want to make on top of that? A couple questions.
My only comment is to introduce Margarita Borges, the Director of International Admissions and Enrollment, who I'm sure can speak to any of the detailed questions that you have.
Welcome. I noticed, I'll kick us off, and really appreciate this office and the work, and just underscores how international we are. It looked, I noticed that there was one FTE to one person to coordinate the transition for newcomers. That was one of the additions. Based on the chart and just looking at the intakes that are in the packet here, does this coordinator have to manage all of the students coming in each month, or what are the and then could you talk about some of these transition needs of the students and just how this FTE factors into that?
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today. And actually, our newcomer transitions coordinator is in the audience today, Oscar Alvarenga. He's amazing. So yes, it's the only position in MCPS that helps coordinate, but he works with all offices in MCPS in the community and with DHHS, and he has a counterpart also in DHHS, and the collaboration is mutual. He helps manage the Welcome Center, so he's there on the ground with our community partners, welcoming all the families. And although he's not consistently involved in the everyday enrollment, although he is and he supports that, it's more about making sure the whole family is supported and connecting them to the right resources, whether it's within MCPS with our parent community coordinators, our social workers, our restorative justice personnel, but also with our community partners who are also in the Welcome Center with us, enrolling students in insurance, providing legal resources, and other type resources. Would we love to have more transition coordinators in the future? Would be great, of course, but again, he's up here coordinating all of the other teams within and without MCPS.
Across government.
Yes.
Great. Well, we're glad you're here. Thank you. I know it's hard work and important work, so thank you. I know Councilmember Mink has a question on this item.
Thank you. Yeah, first I really wanted to commend the work of the International Office. Obviously in District 5, we have a very large newcomer population. We are seeing like large influxes from certain key areas that are coming to particular housing complexes, and then all of those families will end up, in one particular school, for example, and it's very overwhelming for those schools and the staff there. And I know that your office has played a critical role as support. And so thank you very much, Ms. Borges and Mr. Alvarenga. And I know that the return on investment that we get with the International Office is very, very good. And I very much appreciate the collaboration with HHS as well, and look forward to, I know, we've talked about with in the HHS committee, as well, the importance of coming back to learn more about how all those pieces are being tied together as this work progresses. Wanted to ask about the social integration of students who are arriving into our area, because I know that a lot of our work is making sure that families have resources like food and housing, and that they're getting enrolled in the school system and all of those things. But on the ground inside schools, teachers and staff and the students there also need to think about the culture and the social lives of the students. And, if we are not able to do that type of work, then we can see conflicts between different groups of students. And I know that obviously funding and staffing is limited. So I was curious about what kind of work or thinking you've done around this aspect of things, and if there in future was more funding available for that type of work, what that might look like.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we've done in the International Admissions Office over the last few years is really leverage our team of EML therapeutic counselors, or we call them our ETCs. There's a team of about 40, and they are assigned to over 50 schools a full day each, and then they support students across the county through a referral process. The ETCs rotate in and out of IAE throughout the year, and this is the first year we've been able to really implement this year-round because it started in the summer 2 years ago. But we start by welcoming all newcomers in IAE and doing a mental health check. So every child that comes in through IAE gets about 20 minutes, roughly, depending on the situation, with an EML therapeutic counselor, where they ask questions, ask about their trip over, ask about how they are with their family. And the intent is to try and flag any reunification issues, acculturation issues, any trauma that they may have experienced on their trip over. And when we do identify these flags, we communicate, we write up a concise report, and we communicate with the student's school counselor wherever they will be enrolling. The idea, again, is to flag this early, make that connection to their home school and the mental health professionals at their school, and not wait for a crisis to occur or for things to elevate at the school after they're enrolled. So the ETCs and the work that they do, both in the schools and IAE, is critical. I also have a student advisory committee that meets every month. I have students from all high schools meeting and talking about orientations and how to best support students as they walk into their schools. And we want to identify what some schools are doing around orientations and welcoming families, and try and elevate that and scale that up. We also invite offices both inside and outside of MCPS. We have principal roundtables to get the input of principals on how they are managing their newcomers. Some principals have higher populations of newcomers, of course, than other principals, but getting all of this feedback from the community, from students, from principals, to be able to improve on these resources and supports.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm just going to draw one more connection to a previous topic that we covered, working in conjunction with the HHS committee. Again, we were just talking about linkages to learning. And when we look at the newcomer population and that influx into particular schools, we can see enormous population growth in some of those schools from the newcomer population. And it may be a school that just had a construction project. For example, Burt Mills Elementary School just finished a major construction project. So they're not on the linkages for learning list. And so now you have an extremely high needs population. You have a very large population, and they're not on the list for linkages to learning. And that school is one of, not the only school, but is asking for a linkages program. And we don't really have a cost efficient way to give them one at the moment. And so your work there has been really, really critical, and, continuing to think about how we can make sure we are funneling resources into those spaces to accommodate for other shortcomings is going to be really important. So thank you for your work there. And I yield.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Mink. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. Really appreciate the work. I had the opportunity to visit last year, saw it, and was already very familiar with the work, and agree with Oscar's tremendous dedication, the entire team, and thank you, Margarita, for all of your support and leadership. It really has been extraordinary. I think we were fortunate to have Councilmember Mink join us at the HHS committee session last week, where we discussed the HHS side of the newcomer initiative and investment, and it will come as no surprise that my colleagues on the committee unanimously supported making the recommendation that we continue that investment because it is so critical and puts our community in a position to make sure everybody succeeds. And I have been very impressed with the manner in which we have thoughtfully provided the holistic support necessary for families, because I can't stress enough, it's the trauma from the trip itself, but often the trauma that they experience from the countries that they are leaving, some war-torn and experiencing very significant gang issues and real struggle and challenges that are bearing themselves out, but also for some of the students, long gaps in education, years in some instances. And so we need to continue to invest in the central office where we are investing and supporting, but we also need to continue to invest in the schools that are absorbing these students and ensure that we have full METS programs, that we have the staff and support necessarily in a culturally appropriate way. So that, again, we're setting these students and their teachers and their administrators up for success. And I know that work is complicated, particularly now. But I really appreciate those efforts. Thank you.
Amen to that. And I'm glad Councilmember Mink brought up the example of, how interconnected this issue is when we get a real increase of students. So, yes.
If I could add, and I was able to visit Burnt Mills right after we had a rush of newcomers there and the complications that we were having with, I believe it's the Enclave or one of the apartment buildings there. And I mean, literally, Margarita didn't say this, but we have one particular staff member who just went above and beyond to work with every individual family that was in the Enclave. And the other thing I would just say, Margarita's team tracks every single week. We can tell you who's come, we have 4 parts of this process, where they are in the sequence, how long it takes. Several years ago, we had a request to make sure that was below 2 weeks. Everybody is below 2 weeks. Some is as short as 3 to 5 days. And we can look at trends and be predictive as to where those impacts will be at the school level. So there's a lot of data infrastructure that we've been able to put together with our partners in the technology office and the data office. So that work is ongoing. But I think a theme here, right, that we keep hearing from the tough cuts that we've had to make, I mean, as schools are the center to tackle so many of the societal and economic issues that we face as a county, as a country, right, as a society, we are stretched, right? So you hit a very good point about it's not just what happens at IAE, and we have built off this very tight, smooth handoff to the schools. It's what's happening in those schools, right? And we have added staff there, but this is certainly a next step, is that professional development of the staff in school and knowing exactly what the students need.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And Chair Jawando?
Yes, please.
If I just may recognize, I think that the person that you're referring to is Ms. Marcella Bobo Elias. She's the parent community coordinator there, and she is phenomenal.
And that is a perfect segue, because I too went past ESSER stuff. I want to go back again because I have some questions, and I think we're doing okay on time. So, but don't go anywhere yet. The parent community coordinator, critical along with our PPWs and just like dealing with attendance issue. We've talked about this before. Just perfect example of one who's like duties as assigned, right? Like going above and beyond here. My reading of this is that, ESSER's been really helpful in expanding some of those services, right? Obviously. And parent community coordinators in particular, I think my reading of this is that there's a $3.1 million in the base budget for PCCs, and that there's $1.7 million in ESSER. So does that mean that there's 4.8 million for PCCs, or how, is that correct? Am I reading that right? And go ahead.
So in the 1.7 parent community coordinator position, they were put aside into the ESSER on a 1-year timetable, right? Because we had to make things fit at the end of last fiscal year, budget cycle, and we took 19 off. They fit the requirements of the ESSER grant, so it allowed us to move them to ESSER temporarily for 1 year, and they were a priority to put back on the base budget from ESSER at the beginning of this budget cycle.
So it's the same amount of PCCs, but you just switched the funding. You paid for part of their salary last year with ESSER. It's going away, so you're putting it back in the base. Not expanding anything, but just keeping, that's just to keep what we have.
Correct. And I will say with full transparency that whatever the budget situation is next year, PCCs and PPWs will be at the top of this office's list to see if there are potential additions, because they have high impact, high value.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things to come back to is just that them in particular, in the context of, where we've been vis-a-vis our growth in the schools, in the needs, and kind of their trajectory. And I think we could talk about it in the attendance context. We could talk about it in the international enrollment. There's a lot of contexts in which the work that they're doing is so critical. And I think we need to dig into that a little bit. It's something post-budget, but another area where, front line of responding to the challenges we're seeing in multiple areas. So, okay. So I think we can move on. Thank you so much. We agree this is your position and your office are super important, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Yeah.
Okay. The next area of the packet is dual enrollment. And
I'm sorry,
Oh.
Ms. McGuire. I messed up. That was one of the things. I have one more. You can go. You sit, but it might. But don't go too far. The other question was around the air quality. This is another thing we hear about a lot from folks, especially post-COVID, and we get a lot of calls in our office about it. There's 1.4 million for air quality monitoring in here. Does that? Are we using particulate air filters in our facilities? And then how is this monitoring system used at the school level?
This is for SenseWare air monitoring, and so we have in every one of our classrooms in all 211 schools across the district air monitor sensors that are continually working constantly, and so we're able then centrally to get readings from any one of our classrooms if there's any elevated levels of anything from carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, different fumes or whatever. And so it really provides us, and I'm not aware of any other district, it doesn't mean there isn't one, I'm not aware of one that has this level of air quality monitoring. And so, yes, that gives us, vision across all of our schools as far as what's happening in the classrooms on a day-to-day basis.
That's great. So that was the first question. Thank you. So all schools have those monitors. Does it use particulate? Does MCPS use particulate air filters in its facilities?
Not seeing Mr. Adams. We
He
use.
just walked out too, so I don't know. Maybe if he comes back, we'll get him. But all right. Yeah. Come on. Yeah, no. He's not. Okay. So if you get back to us on that, that's a question we've gotten more than once, and I don't know the answer.
Yep.
So.
Yeah,
It sounds like you don't either.
Right. We
Okay.
use, filters that are certainly, up to code and of high quality, and we change them multiple times a year. The specifics around that particular type, I'll have to get back to you.
Just might be good we get the question, might be good to just say we are doing it. And then the monitoring of these systems, who's responsible for that? Is that Mr. Adams off? Like who's on the daily basis? Who's monitoring that?
So that would be our Office of Sustainability and Compliance within Mr. Adams' shop.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. That was one. And then that was it. Now we're ready. Thank you.
all right, I think we are on page 7 of the packet, dual enrollment. And certainly this is an area that the committee did speak about a good bit early in April when you received an update on college and career readiness. And so we wanted to bring it back and talk some more about it, particularly in the budget context. Dual enrollment, of course, is the ability for students to earn college credit during high school. And MCPS and Montgomery College offer dual enrollment primarily through 3 programs that are outlined here on page 7 of your packet. And there is a summary sheet attached on circle 14 of your packet that really talks a little bit more in depth about the specifics of where those programs are and how students sign up for them. The budget for dual enrollment has increased significantly over the last few years. Of course, the blueprint legislation emphasizes the requirement for students to be able to access dual enrollment, and the budget associated with that has continued to increase. For FY25, the school system is reporting just a little bit over $4 million for dual enrollment, and that's up from $1.8 million in FY21. So as we can see, this is a significantly growing area of cost. There are also on page 8 of your packet some updates on the unique number of students enrolled in the dual enrollment participation, as well as the total number of courses that MCPS is offering. And council staff, I did go through and look a little bit on the state's website for some data. There is one report where the school system's data wasn't available, which is why I think it shows zeros there, but in general, other updated data points are available and do indicate in the 21 to 22 school year, MCPS reported a total of 1,643 students with a dual enrollment course and a total of 1,457 courses flagged as dual enrollment. I know in your previous meeting you had some discussion that, again, MCPS may want to clarify some of these data points today, but had some discussion around sort of the differences of where and how students can access those courses and the issues around the numbers of courses that are flagged. Just one other comment. Again, in looking at the state's data, MCPS's numbers do appear similar in that respect to Anne Arundel and Baltimore County. They are significantly lower than Prince George's County, Howard County, and Frederick County, just for sort of comparison's sake with some of our neighboring large jurisdictions.
Appreciate that. And welcome, Dr. Floyd. And I think we talked about some of those reasons with Montgomery College and others about dual enrollment, why numbers certain places might be relying on it more heavily than others, but we had that, there's reasons for that, but we do want to see our number going up, and it is going up. So anything you want to add to that?
No, you. Good afternoon. I think you summed it up quite nicely.
Okay. I had, you answered the question about the data being available. The only other thing I wanted to bring up was just to get this out in the open, because this is something we heard during budget season as well, is the costs, covering the costs of courses and transportation. And I know, so could you talk about the state of where that is and what this budget will do? Will that do more of that, or and kind of what the vision for that is for covering costs and transportation?
Yes, sir. Per the blueprint legislation, we are to cover the cost. Students are to have access to these opportunities at no cost. So that includes tuition, fees, making sure that we have transportation available during the course of the school day. We anticipate that the number of students who are interested in pursuing this opportunity will continue to climb. This year, we've seen a great increase over last year. This is the first year that we are providing this opportunity to all students at no cost. Previously, with the College Career Readiness and College Completion Act, we were to provide access to students who were FARMS eligible. Now, that is not one of the prerequisites. So the expectation is that we provide opportunities to students who are deemed college and career ready, but not to preclude access for students who are not yet college and career ready. So we are to continue to do what we've always done based on the MOUs that we have under the legislation moving forward. So again, to your point,
So
we anticipate it's going to grow.
Continue paying for it, and it's going to, but the cost will keep going up because more students enroll, hopefully, and And but now, as we've done last year, everyone gets transportation and payment. It's covered.
What's new from the MCPS part, which was different last year, is that we put in place the opportunity for students who wish to travel to the college campus during the school day, a structure where they could catch the school bus from all 25 of our high schools. That's put in place at the beginning. Students who want to take advantage of that, make sure their counselors are informed. Those who do not want to take advantage of it, certainly they do not, and so those routes do not run. Currently, we have 4 routes that are running from 4 schools. Students generally don't want to catch the yellow school bus to the college campus. They want to take advantage of the other opportunities that
Free ride on.
the free ride on, absolutely. So we have made that available, but it's not being accessed as much as we would imagine, or not.
Well, I wouldn't have wanted to be known as the student on the college campus either, so I get that. Councilmember Albornoz, anything on this point? Councilmember Mink, I don't think so. And we have $4 million requested and you projecting a minimum of 2,000 next year.
A minimum of 2,000, perhaps more. This year, we thought we would reach around 1,900. We may actually reach 2,000 students this year. So we anticipate at least 2,000 next year, and again, maybe more.
Well, we're hoping many of us were at the ribbon cutting for the East County campus, or center, excuse me, of Montgomery College. Campus will be later, down the line. We want that to happen too, and we hope that will be another thing that can be taken advantage of and playing with the dual enrollment numbers. Councilmember Mink, did you have anything on this item? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we can move on.
Can I just take advantage of the transition here? So Mr. Adams did respond, and the answer is yes, we do use particulate filters. Most of the schools have MERV 13 filters in them, and then that's also something that we monitor through the Senseware as well.
Great. We love real-time updates. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adams. All right. I think we're up to next.
Chair Jawando?
Yes.
While they're switching, and on that air quality note, would it be possible, Mr. Hall, to get a list of you listed a number of things that we're monitoring for? That's awesome. That's great. Would it be possible to get a list of exactly what those things are and like what triggers scrutiny?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
And I also wanted to just say thank you. I know we have Ms. Acevedo from OMB who's been up here. Is that you? Did I get you? Okay, I thought so. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so the final section of your packet relates to the Technology Modernization Capital Improvements Program project. And this is a project that we do tend to talk about in conjunction with the operating budget because it is almost entirely funded with current revenue, which of course is the same general funding that is also used to support the operating budget, and certainly so much of it does have overlap with technology conversations that we have as the operating budget as well. So that is why this is here before you today. The Board of Education's request for the Technology Modernization CIP project is a 6-year increase of $23.154 million over the 6-year total approved in the amended CIP last spring. And I do have a correction to make to the packet. I inadvertently noted that the executive's recommendation did not change the level of funding, but actually the executive's recommendation is lower by the amount of I believe, and Ms. Joao can correct me on this, but I believe is lower by the amount of the Mid-Atlantic Innovation Center, and so that's an item that we'll be talking about. The board's request overall is for a higher level of effort across the CIP than in recent years. And you can see at the top of page 9 of your packet a very detailed breakout of the items that are in the technology modernization project, and followed by sort of a descriptive version of those items talking about what is included in TechMod. And this, while there certainly are other elements of the operating budget where technology equipment is purchased or refreshed or repaired, this really is the bulk of the major device supply, if I can say it that way, for the system's device allocation model. In general, the elements that you see broken out on the top of page 9 reflect sort of a general level of increase across the 6-year period. There is one significant increase that is requested, and that is $2.5 million in FY25 for the Mid-Atlantic Innovation Center, with $650,000 of ongoing funding in subsequent years. This is a new initiative that MCPS is proposing to provide hands-on learning experience, innovative technologies, including robotics, drones, and aeronautics, and have a dedicated space for students to experience that learning within. There is more information in your packet, and certainly MCPS representatives here can speak more eloquently about it than I can. But I would note that, again, this does appear to be an initiative still in its planning phase and planning efforts. The $2.5 million is in part for some of those planning and curriculum development efforts, but also associated with a lease and a lease build-out. And so there may be an opportunity for the committee to allow some of that planning to go forward and come back to have that conversation about a lease, a space, and that dedicated funding at a later point in time when more is known about, again, those initial stages and about the ongoing operating costs. Currently, the carrying cost in the capital budget is portrayed here, but the current carrying cost in the operating budget and those impacts is unknown, and certainly would be more known after some of the planning as well. So council staff recommends, two more fiscal notes. One, this is also a project that does receive some federal reimbursement dollars, the federal E-rate dollars, and so typically the council assumes that the school system will be able to add that level of funding when that appropriation, when that reimbursement is received to the level of funding during the school year, and we would anticipate seeing that appropriation for the current year very soon.
Appreciate that. We do have, so we love technology, and we'd love to hear how it's being used. Is there anything you want to add contextually to any of that? Introduce yourself.
Thank you. Well, first, we always want to thank the County Council for your generous budgeting every year in our Tech Mod budget. What's really important to note is,
Introduce yourself.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Stephanie Sharon, Chief of Strategic Initiatives. And again, thank you to the County Council for funding our Tech Mod budget. We really try to utilize the spirit of Tech Mod as not just refreshing and maintaining our current infrastructure, but also thinking about how we can utilize technology as an accelerator to equity throughout our district as we think about how to utilize our funds for innovative projects. So this year, as you know, coming off of ESSER, we spent a lot of money in providing one-to-one devices for teachers and for students, and we do want to maintain that. A couple key points that I just want to mention to make everybody aware. As far as the refresh component is concerned, we did provide teacher laptops at the cost of $20 million all at once during the pandemic. That is not typically how we purchase technology. We usually purchase technology as what I like to refer to as the layaway plan over multiple years. So we are going back to that model, and we're going to start refreshing teacher laptops on a 4 to 5 year cycle. That is going to be starting this summer. I also want to mention...
Before you go off of that,
Yes.
I had a question about that.
Sure.
So how do you communicate with teachers, and how will you communicate with teachers about the refresh and where they are in the replacement schedule? This is something I've heard in the schools quite a bit.
No, this is great. We actually just sent the memo. I don't know if it actually got distributed yet or not, but I just approved a memo that goes out where teachers are all identified for which year they're going to be in Tech Mod. So we do them in quarters. So over the next 4 years, everyone is on the schedule. We recently sent that out to all schools.
Principals, that it'll be distributed, so they'll know teacher
Where they're at.
where they are.
Yes, but what's important to note, though, if they had problems with their laptop or all of a sudden their laptop breaks, we're not going to say, sorry, we're going to get to you in 2 years. We will, of course, provide repairs and replacements as necessary.
Thank you. Saying another point.
Yes, so we also are going to be continuing updating our computer labs in our secondary schools. As our curriculum team is continuing to offer opportunities in our high schools for innovative programming, we got to make sure that that technology is up to date as well. So we were on a pause during the pandemic, so we're going to be updating that refresh. And we also still are providing in a limited availability MiFi devices for families for internet connectivity. Not to the scale that we did during the pandemic, but we are still providing that on an as-needed basis. So as families do request that, we are still providing that, and that comes out of our Tech Mod budget. We are almost completely upgraded away from Promethean boards in all of our classrooms to our upgraded box lights as a result of ESSER and Tech Mod. We're still engaging in providing that refresh, though, in some additional areas in school buildings and offices. And then again, of course, our network and wireless access points are a critical component of this work as well. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Go Guardian, which I know has been a hot topic for folks. So the thing that I want to stress, although we did cut out of the budget the almost $600,000 that Go Guardian costs. We are looking and are narrowing down our possibilities for replacements that will do the same thing as Go Guardian, but are much more fiscally responsible coming out of ESSER. It will do the same thing. It will provide classroom monitoring, so teachers will have a technology solution going into the fall. We should know within the next month or so what that solution is going to be after we continue our testing and configuration environment.
So you're not ready to say what it is? 'Cause I had been told, I had thought you had identified it.
We don't want to make any promises yet.
Not 100% sure yet.
Exactly.
And because the other part of this is the training, if there's going to be, because I was told, little birdie told me it was going to be something that had been used in the past, so teachers would have some familiarity with it. But if you're not ready, we don't want misinformation. We don't want you to say something and then it's not that. So, but you're saying in the next month or so, because we want to make sure that the teachers have the time to turn around.
And what our hope is that if we narrow it down, because we have about 3 that we're looking at right now to narrow down to, that if we narrow down to the one that was the prior utilization, is that we can turn it on right away so that teachers can start experimenting with it now. And then, of course, provide all of the necessary training that they need to utilize it.
And that was your last update?
That was my last item. The only thing I was going to ask was for Dr. Trenkamp, just to talk a little bit about some of the innovation projects, in particular the Mid-Atlantic Innovation Center that is in the Tech Mod.
Now, let me let Councilmember Allen ask his question, and then we'll go to you.
Thanks. I mean, it's preliminary because understandably you're limited in what you can say, but you get what you pay for too. And so while clearly we want to be fiscally responsible, if we're going to utilize a device and spend money on something that not only isn't going to work as well, but people won't utilize or access because it doesn't work as well, then it defeats the whole purpose. So, and I know you're doing that cost-benefit analysis, and I trust your, your perspective and your experience, but just know that similar to the safety and security conversation, these are, in my mind, like non-negotiables, because this is a tool that our kids are just ill-prepared to utilize. And I say that as a parent, so who's doing my best, like every other parent, to observe and keep up with the technology as it exists. And so if we've got a tool that we know is working and working pretty well, then unless there's something as good or even better, money always is an issue, but this is a really important category. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. But I also do want to make sure that we're clear that it is not the only way that we protect students online through that software. We actually have and have continued to expand a very robust filtering programs that we have that provide the opportunity for us to prevent students from being able to access dangerous content online before it even gets to their Chromebook. This is a complement to that, and the main purpose of Go Guardian is for teachers to be able to see exactly what the kids are doing so they're not getting off track, and to utilize it as a classroom management tool. But it is part of an accoutrement, not just a singular tool that we use.
Yeah, and I think that teacher management thing is what we hear about the most. Is like people were freaking out, frankly, that they were not. But so they are going to have that tool, and it's going to be something that is, to Councilmember Albornoz's point, as good or better.
Yes.
All right, you heard it here. Yes, Mid-Atlantics.
Okay. Thank you for having us here. So you heard a little bit.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did. You did. Hi, Kara Trenkamp, and I am the Director for Digital Innovation. I'm excited to talk a little bit about how we continue to innovate during times of tight budget season, because even though we are really focused on making sure we can meet the dollar amounts and cover the needs, we know that the growing need and expanding need is around continuing to innovate and provide cutting-edge solutions for our staff and students around technology. With the blueprint, there is a piece in the blueprint around workforce development, around developing STEAM initiatives to ensure that staff, students, and our community members are able to engage productively in the new job market and the workforce. And so we heard loud and clear over the last 3 years coming out of the pandemic, even before the pandemic, we heard from staff and students and parents around the area of robotics, around where our student robotics teams at the middle school and high school level asked us to continue to support them in better ways, to ensure that we had staff that were certified to help them run their heavy machinery, to build their robots, to have dedicated space for robotics testing so that they can engage in these national competitions. And we have many students groups that do that already, but many are doing that by finding their own resources, by finding their own staff that are certified, by finding their own testing grounds. We also heard from our community around expanding access to aeronautics and aviation. The Magruder Aviation Project, for example, program, for example, big wait lists, very popular program. How can we find innovative ways to build spaces and access without competing, without taking away from what makes Magruder special, but also expanding that access? And so as we've worked over the last year and a half, we've talked with teachers, we've talked with community, we've talked with students, and we engaged in a series of STEAM pop-up events where staff would put 3D printers and digital screens and AR, VR equipment and drones and robotics equipment in the trunks of their car. And they would head out around the schools and they would set up these experiences for kids over a series of days and for the community as well. We're looking at expanding that, at formalizing that. We spoke with you last year at this time about our mobile classroom, big RV that is equipped with
Seen it many times. It's
flexible space. It's coming. It's coming later in the next 2 months. We got creative with our funding and some of our grant opportunities and our equipment. We're using our staffing to, instead of putting all that in their cars, they're putting it on the mobile classroom, and we'll be ready to go out. We already have presentations like this. The schools will already start emailing saying, can you come, to our school? We have a festival May 10th. We have a back to school community event. We have an end of year festival. We have these things. So how we support that community engagement and that expanded outreach around not just fun awareness, but actually really important skills that kids starting in the elementary level and then building up get exposure to, where they can gain that certification, gain that experience, and then and be able to either get jobs before they graduate or as they graduate and be ready to move forward. The Makespace is an extension of that. We spoke about that last year as well, the Mid-Atlantic Center. And the Mid-Atlantic Innovation Center is, again, a formalized space where staff, students, and the community from Montgomery County, but also from beyond in the region, can come and have immersive experiences in spaces that are set up with that heavy machinery, with the 3D printing labs, with the digital studio labs, recording labs, the aeronautics pieces, the drones. They can engage in competitions. They can engage in certification pathways. They can engage in workshops. And so really trying to help build that workforce with our students, with our staff, and then with the broader community. So that's the vision there. And, as Ms. McGuire shared, we are still in that collaborative planning phase looking to engage our community partners, obviously engage you, have this conversation here today, and look forward to continuing that development and discussion.
So what does that mean vis-a-vis the recommendation on the funding? Because we do have to make a decision about that. I think you recommended, did I see like 650 or something, or what was it?
The council staff recommendation is to approve the project, but to hold on all of the funding that's associated with the MAIC at this time. That would be a reduction of the board's request of $2.5 million in FY25, and then $650 in each of the subsequent years. And again, council staff's certainly not opposed in any way to the concept, but really just suggesting that that's a lot of upfront investment at this moment with the level of planning that remains, and the committee and the council and the board can come back to this when more of the costs and specifics are known.
Well, we've certainly done our fair share of sparing money in the CIP on the back of, on our side. Just your comment on that, like you requested an amount, the exec gave it. What was the amount that the exec sent over?
So I'll let Ms. Jawa speak to that, but my understanding is that my recommendation would be in concert with the executive.
With the executives, okay. Is that correct?
Veronica Hawa, OMB, yes. It would be just a tiny bit, the executive recommendation was a tiny bit lower by 200,000 or something like that, but it was their request minus MAIAC and that tiny bit.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm going to use this opportunity
to
say that the county executive did not recommend the MAIAC at the time or now, because he understands MCPS is still in the process of identifying a superintendent. Once MCPS identifies a superintendent, he would like to have a conversation with this person to understand his or her support for this proposal, for this project, and the prioritization between all the needs and all the programs of this program.
The board approved this?
Yeah.
We had Ms. Harris here. She's out in the hallway now. But
We have spoken with the board about this idea. I think they were excited for us to continue to explore, continue to plan, think outside of the box around how we could move forward creatively while also thinking about the funding needs. We do have a presentation coming up in early May with the board where we will be then talking about sort of the next phases of this project, in addition to the other innovative pieces that have coming.
So to the point of the fact that you asked for money, you asked for $25 million? No. I'm sorry. 2.5, sorry. That decimal makes a big difference?
Yeah.
2.5 million in 25 and then 650 going, like, what was that request based on? What was it going to go to? It sounds to me that you are in a planning phase, and are you in agreement with council staff at this point that you don't need that money next year? We always take more money in the CIP, but that you're moving forward and you'll come back for an off-year amendment or something like that?
Yep. So I think that there were different options for moving forward today, and I think we were excited to come and bring the conversation and really just talk through what this could look like and how this could benefit.
Exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. But there are different ways we can still move forward. So one of the ways in this proposal that we were thinking was if we could secure a location, close maybe to public transportation. We could start right away with building out. We do have some funding tied up in equipment for from ESSER for equipment for the center, the heavy machinery, and we could start building out that heavy machinery dirty lab. We could build out some spaces for the robotics teams to start right away and start coming over while we still think about some of the other bigger components there.
That's underlying the request for the money.
You got it. And without that, though, we still are prepared to move forward with collaborative conversations, again, with some key community partners. Our vendor partners are very interested in helping to support this and make this come alive and help to sort of create that co-vision. We have staff already on my team in the Digital Innovation Group working on curriculum, working on building out credit-bearing courses for staff. And also still continuing to procure technologies and test those out from the backs of their cars, and taking those out there. So work can still continue. It's just a matter of what that looks like based on some funding.
Appreciate that. All right. Well, you said very nicely that you can still move forward. So I think we will go with the council staff's recommendation, without any objection from colleagues, to hold off for now, but with great excitement and anticipation for the planning and programming to come. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions for you, though, before you leave, just for on the tech mod side. So you mentioned the overall schedule for computer science lab space. Well, no, is there an overall schedule for updating the computer lab space? You mentioned the computer lab space, but is there a similar analogous timeline to like what the teachers are going to receive for their devices or that kind of thing?
Yeah, for the computer labs?
Yes.
Yes, so last summer, we went ahead and refreshed one lab across all of the secondary schools. And we did that because coming back and getting our buildings up and going after the pandemic, the first year we spent just making sure that we had the Chromebooks, we had chargers, the hotspots were working. It was sort of an overall triage, teacher laptops and desktops, interactive panels, that core technology. Last summer, we started focusing on building out that specialty technology and replacing that with one lab per secondary school. Our elementaries really don't have computer labs anymore because they run one-to-one in their classrooms. That's how they're using that space. This year, we have heard from our high schools in particular that they really do need some attention on their specialty programs. So we are, again, going to do an additional lab across all of the high schools, and that will really hit a lot of their specialty labs where they're holding classes in those spaces all day long, and they're focused on cybersecurity or digital studio or writing labs and things. So they really do have some special equipment. So one example, Blair High School comes to mind. They have some specialty equipment there to run some of their IB programs, and we're going to work with them to make sure that that's all refreshed and ready to go so that those students have access to top-notch technology. So that's all this summer that will happen. And then as we engage in our 4-year refresh, we'll go deeper into that first set of schools in addition to the lab replacement this summer, and then next summer the second set, and so on.
And folks how are they aware of this schedule?
Yep. So, So we do have a couple collaborative groups. So we work with our MAG, so our MCAP advisory group, so all of our administrators are leaders of the building, but we also have an MCEA tech advisory group. So we meet monthly. We are scheduled to meet again this week, where we talk through these issues. What would be the impact to teachers with GoGuardian? What's the impact with teachers with the laptop replacement? And so we really think through, and we have actually co-written multiple memos and communications. Remind 101 was one we worked on together and released a pretty extensive FAQ in partnership with MCEA so that we had clear expectations on, what this solution was, what's the expectation for use, and how teachers can get the support they need should they want to use that technology.
Thank you very much. Last question I had, and I'll see if colleagues have any. On page 3 of our packet, there was a 1.3 million identified for testing material.
That's an error, and I apologize.
Okay.
The correct, it does relate to the Chromebook repair, which is shown separately, and again, that's a table that I failed to update. I apologize.
No problem. That was great. It looked like it was the same thing, but all right. So it's not, no question there. It's Chromebook repair.
Yes.
Which is part of what we're talking about. Okay. Any questions from colleagues? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Guire, is there anything else? No. Okay. So I think we had these were great updates. Thank you, Mr. Hall. And we have a big one coming up next week with a lot in it. And I think that's when we'll be joined by our union partners on that panel. So hopefully we'll get the big room that day. And we love the 7th floor, but we'd prefer the 3rd for that one, just for whoever's listening. And that's when we're going to talk about, as listed in this packet, which I really appreciate, Mr. McGuire, a great packet as always, and you're doing a lot, so this is really helpful. And thank you, MCPS, for getting back timely with information. We're going to be discussing vacancies and lapse, recruitment, contractual services, special education, compensation benefits, and a statistical profile. So there'll be a lot for that one. I think it'll probably go the full session, that one. And we look forward to being joined by our partners. And with that, I think we are adjourned for today. Yeah. Thank you.